The Trump administration's increasing apparent willingness to abandon Ukraine in order to stop Russia's war against Ukraine is raising questions as to America's traditional alliances and why the U.S. is treating some of its allies as adversaries. And joining us now is Daniel Rothenberger. He is the co-director of ASU's Future Securities Initiatives. Good to have you here.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you, Ted.
Yeah. The U.S. working with Russia to end the war against Ukraine. I mean, just saying it. What are your thoughts?
Well, on the positive side, it will be good to see this devastating conflict come to an end. And I think that President Trump's reference to the terrible casualties that have been suffered on both sides, that's certainly something positive for the world. Let's see this conflict move to some sort of negotiated conclusion. And most wars do end with negotiated settlements, so that's a positive sign.
That's a positive sign, but Ukraine is not taking part, Europe is not taking part, and an agreement will most likely mean giving land to Russia that Russia did not have before their invasion. Is that a positive sign?
If that is how it plays out, no. We don't know where all this is going. It will probably take quite a bit of steps. Just think of the Israel-Gaza process with these multiple stages. So in the real world of a negotiated settlement, if that happens, it's probably going to require a ceasefire to start, then some sort of peacekeeping process. Your point about keeping Ukraine out of it and not having European allies involved is a clear criticism, and it won't work if that is the plan. It simply won't take place.
Why would that be the plan then? What is the thinking behind this? I'm not asking you to speak for the administration, but my goodness, Ukraine was invaded, but they're not. The president doesn't want Ukraine as part of the peace. Is this strong man thing where I'm the leader, Putin, you're the leader, let's make a deal?
It's a great question. We don't know now what is going on in Trump's mind or in the U.S. political vision of where it's all going, right? It's just uncertain. It is clear that there will not be a substantive peace without Ukraine on board. I mean, look at this conflict. Ukraine is the victim of a war of aggression, one of the worst possible crimes in international law, for all the obvious reasons. If one were to allow states to aggressively take over land, what would that produce for the world order? And then we've seen a pretty substantial and impressive unification of European and U.S. efforts to isolate Russia and to provide Ukraine with all sorts of assistance. That's been extraordinarily successful if you consider the imbalance of power between Russia and its large military and Ukraine as a much smaller power.
It's interesting. Some reports have been that Russia wants to have Ukraine ruled out for NATO membership, and that and I think that someone from the Trump administration, maybe the president himself, said it's unrealistic for Ukraine to reclaim territory that Russia has taken. Those are pretty sobering things there.
It's true. A lot of the statements that are made publicly are very hard to wade through. Let's look about the real history of this conflict. Is it began in 2014 when Russia took over Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine. And then we just had almost exactly 3 years ago this massive land invasion with the goal, Russia's goal, to push out those Zelensky democratically elected governments, take power, maybe install some pro-Russia government, and thereby exercise control over Ukraine. It's an extraordinary story how Russia has not succeeded in its war aims.
Not succeeded until now, if those war aims are to get some land. If they wanted all of Ukraine, yeah, that ain't going to happen, I don't think. But there has been land claimed by Russia. How difficult? Peacekeepers? Are they going to go ahead and say, all right, we'll just go ahead and give this up? That doesn't sound like Putin to me.
I mean, about 20% of Ukraine is in Russian hands now, right? And yet in the last year, it's only about 1,500 square miles that have been taken. So this war is basically at a standstill militarily, with some people thinking, Russia's on top. But in the end of the day, the Ukrainian people have shown extraordinary courage, extraordinary resilience. There's little chance Ukrainians will accept some sort of deal that doesn't involve respect for their sovereignty.
The idea of Europe and NATO wondering where they stand in relationship to the United States. I mean, what do you make of this? Again, the idea that allies are now almost treated as adversaries by this administration. What's going on here?
Yes, it's a great question. We don't know, because we don't know how much is talk, how much is posturing, what is real. What we do know is that the Russian attack, the land invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 has unified Europe. It's brought in 2 new countries to NATO, Finland and Sweden. It's bolstered significantly military expenditures on the part of European allies, and it's changed Europeans' understanding of its own need to cover its defense.
How can they cover their defense, though, spend more on defense, when it's very likely they are going to be facing tariffs from the United States? That's not going to help their economies all that much. It seems like that's a spinning wheel that's not going in the right direction.
So we don't know how much realignment is happening. So you're absolutely right that if all of these different pressures are put onto Europe and stress the long-standing U.S.-European alliance, that could produce all kinds of changes. I mean, one of the most extraordinary things that happened in the 20th century is the settlement after the Second World War that allowed countries that had been at war constantly for hundreds of years, depending how you look at it, say France and Germany.
Right.
That it's almost unimaginable now that those countries could be at war with each other. And it's now virtually effortless to pass across borders, to study and work across those borders. And, these are true human accomplishments that have produced peace and stability and incredible economic vitality. Recognizing that is really probably the right way to frame what needs to happen in Ukraine.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens. Real quickly, before you go.
Yeah, sure.
Well, what's the message China is getting out of all this?
So it's a good question. I mean, one of the key messages for the coordinated global response to Russia's war of aggression was to say a war of aggression, even against a power that isn't anywhere near as well armed, may not succeed, might not even succeed at the most basic military levels. So we don't know what happens now. If it turns out that waiting things out that allows for a victory over a certain period of time, that may send a message that, say, Chinese aggression on Taiwan is a winning bet if you're patient.
But the message from the United States is, what, you can't trust us necessarily?
It's a little premature to say that, so let's hope that isn't the story. Right now, there's a lot of talk that is frightening, I think, for the alliance, but it's early in the game, and we don't know where it's all going. So let's just hope that is, that we're seeing a sort of progression towards a rational peace that respects Ukrainian sovereignty.
Daniel Rothenberg, again, always good to have you on. Good to see you. Thanks for
Thank you
joining.
so much.